is that the self-deception narrative? Is that really what you find yourself? For the listeners, help them understand where that lies and how we can recognize it when it starts to happen.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So I think, kind of the easiest way to sum up self-deception is the idea that there is a part of the story that I am either not telling or refusing to acknowledge, right? And so in doing so, I have created problems for others. And it's that lack of willingness to recognize it. That's really the self-deception, because you're looking now at the situation through a distorted lens. Like, I'm looking at it in a way that is going to justify my behavior. So in the case of, when I was, listen, I would be lying if I had said that I hadn't been that parent, right? The mom that was like, listen, I just created life.
Right.
And the least you could do would be get up and handle this child for 15 minutes. But it's, and it's one of those where the self-deception falls in that place where I go, I am, the one who's being wronged. I am the one who's being taken advantage of. I am the one, right? Because I'm only telling myself part of the story. And it's the part of the story that justifies that self-view of me being the person who is so mistreated and so, negatively affected by this situation, that I'm refusing to accept that there's anything else out there, any remote hint of possibility, that maybe I'm also part of the problem, or certainly not contributing to things going well.
Yeah, it's the time that it takes us just to understand the other side of the story. It's sort of like when your friends get divorced and there's always a story that goes along with it, the story that you hear from that individual, the story that other people are telling you. And it's really important when those things happen and you care about those two people, that you tell yourself, you know what? I'm not inside of that marriage. I'm not inside of that story. I value the human that's on the other side, and I'm rooting for them, and I hope that they find peace in what they're looking for. And most importantly, I hope the kids are all set up and good. But the reality is, it's like the easiest thing to think about when you think that there's two sides to every story and you're not inside of that. It's something that always allows me to remember, hey, there's so much more here. And from a business standpoint, communication becomes the outlet, right? I mean, if the more you're communicating, the more you're curious, the more you're asking questions, the closer you can become to solving the biggest problems and having the greatest solutions.
Well, and I think that curiosity is key, right? Because it's very easy for me as a leader to get up here and pontificate, right? I'm communicating. But the curiosity is really where you kind of get at the crux of the matter, to the point where I can really understand what's going on from your perspective, Scott, the challenges that you're running into, the needs that you have, how you're being impacted by what I do, all of that. And I think it's one of those things, the beautiful thing about self-deception, for better or for worse, is it can affect you at home or at work equally, right? And it's equally as insidious, and it's equally as detrimental to the value of those relationships, right? I would say that understanding self-deception and how I can help myself get out of it has single-handedly saved my marriage, right? My husband has a better wife because I am able to at least recognize it. I'd be lying if I said I'd never been self-deceived after I learned about arbiter. Not possible. We're human, right? So that self-deception angle is just kind of what we are naturally tended towards. But the fact that I can stop and go, okay, wait, hold on. Let me ask the question before I bite his head off. Like, he gets a better version of me than if I didn't have that ability.
Well, I think it's there's nothing more frustrating in a relationship than when you feel like the other person just doesn't understand you, and yet they know you so well. And so it's often when the other person paints you as something you're not, and it's so personal that your response is, often the opposite response that you hope to. And so you get into this cycle of, so if you're going to bite your husband's head off and it's going to be about something that's so simple, like for example, you said, hey, can you just do the couple of chores? I've got to go out with the kids all day. Can you get these things done? And you walk in and you immediately bite his head off because nothing was done, yet you don't know that your daughter needed to be picked up at a certain time, and he then took her to the doctor because she cut her finger and it was deeper than you thought. And there's this whole backstory.
Oh yeah.
And we just don't and that's a good version, folks. I mean, I'm giving you the really easy version. There's lots of other really stupid, simple versions that we live every day, but it is true. It's like there's so much more to the story. But when we forget that and we have no empathy and then we paint that person as something they're not in our heads, it does make it difficult to come out of it.
Well, but and then think of the converse of that, right? Like, remember those moments when you feel like somebody did take the time to understand what was going on, or like, hey, you're kind of biting my head off. Like, what's going on? As opposed to like, why are you being such a jerk, right? Like, there's a difference even in asking the questions and getting curious, because like 9 times out of 10, I just need a snack. Like, I'm grumpy because I'm hungry, right? So I mean, it's one of those things where I have to think about those moments when he's paused and been like, hey, what's going on? Like, is everything okay? Like, you seem stressed, right? Like, he knows it's because I bit his head off, but he's taking a moment to get curious, right? And remembering that, I think, is a lot of times where I go, hey, remember the time he gave you grace? Let's extend that in return, right? And it's for him, it's for the people I work with, it's for my kids. Like, whoo, that I think has been a game changer. Just a moment, a pause. Because I feel like so often we're almost conditioned to react to whatever is said than taking a moment to thoughtfully respond.
Yeah, it's interesting when you talk about getting better at home. It's often exponential because it's the place that you're most likely to be not as good as you are when you're on at work. And so, you are at the office and you're a leader and something comes to your desk, you cannot react. You cannot, like, it just doesn't work. And if you do, you won't be a leader very long. So the reality is you have to actually respond. And so all day you do that. And so sometimes you get home and then there's a lot less of that bandwidth to respond. And so the reactions come. So when you start working on this type of stuff at home, I feel like it could be really an exponential result because it's only going to help you get better everywhere else.
Absolutely. I mean, and I think that's what, like, it's a great way to almost practice, right? Because it is a skill. It's not something that comes intuitively to us. Like, I don't always sit there and naturally just go, well, I wonder what that person's going through. Like, no, they just cut me off in traffic. Naturally, they are wrong. I am right. And that's, we close the book on it and we go. But the more you can exercise that muscle, the better off you're going to be. You're absolutely right. I mean, it can only help. Whether you're working on it at work, you're working on it at home, they're going to feed into each other for sure.
If you like clips like this, I have a similar clip here. And if you want to watch the full video, click here.